This is the Criterion Creeps podcast, and tonight we've got a doubleheader, a Rene Clair doubleheader. First up, Nous la Liberte from 1931. Synopsis from Letterboxd. In this classic French satire, Louis, a convict, escapes from prison and takes on legitimate work, making his way up in the business world. Eventually becoming the head of a successful factory, Louis opts to modernize his company with mechanical innovations. But when his friend Emile finally leaves jail years later and reunites with Louis, the past catches up with them. The two, worried about being apprehended by police, long to flee the confines of industry.
That's a pretty descriptive synopsis there.
It's not too bad.
Does it say what a Nous la Liberte means?
No.
Well, I looked it up because I take this podcast seriously.
Yeah, and?
It means freedom for us.
Yeah, it's like the song at the beginning.
Oh, it is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, I didn't know that, and it doesn't say it on Letterboxd.
Hey, RJ.
Yes?
Have you watched Modern Times, the Charles Chaplin film?
I would say that I have, but it was probably so long ago, I don't quite remember. What? But is that bad etiquette?
Yeah, maybe.
I didn't want to take a pause to yawn. Well, I figured I could just talk through it.
Well, RJ,
yeah?
In some strange coincidence, those Modern Times and Nous la Liberte came out around the same time. In fact, the timing was so strange, according to Charles Chaplin, that there was actually a legal suit involved with these films, saying that this film ripped off the other one. Or maybe it's the other way around. I don't know.
Is Modern Times a similar storyline?
There is a lot of assembly line worker humor.
Oh, okay.
Based humor on that kind of idea.
I'm unaware. That's why you're here.
In these savage satires, as we've talked about in the past, I'm not a...
Is it a satire or a farce, Jarrett?
It's satirical. It is not a farce.
See what I did there, though?
Yeah, I know.
I did that thing that you do sometimes.
All my literary terms that people throw around to disguise their lack of
good movies.
No, their lack
allegedly. I didn't do it. I'm innocent.
Yeah.
All those things you throw around there.
Mm-hmm. So here's a movie. It's kind of like this podcast, one might say. It's about two friends.
Oh,
we're not friends in a prison together.
Oh, that's actually pretty close, though.
It's a metaphor.
We have said many times that this podcast is a prison.
And one of them breaks out, which hasn't happened yet, and becomes a captain of industry at the old record shop, being a record salesman on the street to running the whole shebang. And then we get we get these satirical juxtapositions, though, RJ, of like the assembly line in a prison, of making dolls, to being an assembly line worker at a factory. And it's like, is prison in life, is there really a difference when you're working for the man?
Well, to grow up is to work, Jarrett. They tell the kids that throughout the movie.
Yep. And so we get some songs really showcasing that we now live in the sound age, because this is 1931, and you just get people to sing whenever you can.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah. Buddy, our second buddy, he's like really sad that he's still in jail, and he lucks out, gets to escape, and sleeps in a park, and anyway, he winds up
keep going, tell me more.
He winds up working for the company and finding out that his good buddy Louis, he's the man who's running the whole shebang, and then they hang out and get drunk, and libations are had. And then we get a love romance. We get some snobs versus slobs kind of angles involving cake, and a whole lot of what have you. RJ,
a whole lot of what have you. Yeah. Tell me more.
This is the best of the two movies that we'll be talking about tonight.
Can I interrupt you for a second?
Yes.
I agree. I actually think this is the best of the two movies we will talk about tonight.
That being said, what we have here is not a whole heck of a lot to talk about.
Okay.
I recall now when we talked about Le Million, Rene Clair's first entry in the Creeps, I was kind of like on the defense on that movie at least. I was kind of like, yeah,
me?
no, like you weren't like, you didn't really care about it one way or another. I was like kind of pointing out elements of it that I liked. It kind of had this naive charm to it. It had like some kind of something going on. But then I've now since watched more Rene Clair films from the same era, and I realized it's like he's got kind of the same bag of tricks and like the same kind of, and it's like, oh, that's kind of novel the first time, but then you watch like 3 of these movies and you go, he kind of does the same thing poorly all the time. Like there's something just like, I don't know. These movies are 80 years old.
Yes.
So, or coming up 90, somewhere closer to that. And we've seen a lot of stuff in between there. So maybe coming to these films, it's like, as that one fellow was informing us on YouTube on our sister's review, that we're not looking at these movies right. We need to like teleport our minds and sensibilities to 1931 to truly be able to experience and watch these movies.
That.
But
people can't do that.
Right. It's actually impossible. We have to watch them as they are now. And I find it telling that when you look up the essays that accompany these films on the DVDs, they're pretty short. They're pretty like, they're almost like what people write when they want to be polite about films. It's like if you write,
yeah, he's a very nice boy. He just has some excitement problems.
Yeah, so it's like, yeah, look at the way that the Rene Clair made these shots in these movies. You're like, yep, you mean like every director who's ever existed has planned shots and has made choices? Like, oh, what a novel idea. It's a good thing this is in the Criterion Collection. Yeah, I don't know. Modern Times is a better movie. Like,
did you watch that this week too?
No, I didn't, but I've seen it, and I know that it's like, but even like those like Charlie Chaplin movies like are like maybe even over-regarded, but there's like still like a lot more visual flair going on in those movies than in this. I don't know. I have not much to say. RJ,
okay, let me
go for it. How do you feel about this film?
Nous la Liberte. Okay, so I agree with you. I think this is the better of the two. Now, my first 2 notes, Jarrett, I'll read you in the order that they came to me. My first one was, there's something charming about singing inmates. And then my second note was, oh, it's a musical. Because I hadn't pieced that together. I thought it was just like this really playful scene where I was like, oh, look, they're having so much fun. They're in jail. And then a second song happened, and I was like, oh, okay. And then a third song happened, and I was like, oh, all right. And then I think halfway through, the reliance on the music and song it's less dependent on that. So they kind of lean away from it, which I think is the right call. So I don't know why it was so built into the front. But I think this movie has some boring qualities. But I actually, let me surprise you, Jarrett. I actually didn't mind it. I thought this one was watchable. For sure. I watched it and I was like, yeah, it's not bad. Yep. I was like, I can kind of see why this is in here. And for a few reasons, like I think he shows some stuff like in a really, really neat and cool ways where like some of the ways that he shows the automated lines, and I haven't seen Modern Times, so I can't speak to that. Maybe that's better because I'm giving this thing like more attention. If it did just copy that, I don't know, that sucks. But I liked the way that they showed the automated lines, like the conveyor lines.
Sure.
There's the really obvious ones like the division of labor. Not those ones as much. I liked the food lines when it was just like huge bowls of food going down the conveyor lines and people were just kind of free pouring it on themselves. I thought that was really cool. And then I like the way that they incorporate more of that kind of stuff, like the message tubes and the moving like numbered records and filing cabinets where the message tube goes out and the cabinet comes out and then all the papers like rise up on their own. I thought that stuff was pretty cool. So I like the way that they showed that. And I think he also has a really interesting like synchronicity. Is that the word? Is that a word?
Yeah.
How it's synchronicity. I think there's a lot of that throughout the film. So in the opening with the inmates, they're like doing their thing, and then you see like the way that they line up to like leave, and it's very symmetrical, it's very organized, and it's all kind of timed.
Yeah, so that's
And
like
that's a theme throughout almost.
oh, yeah, they kind of like hit it real hard. So yeah, there's like elements of this like that like are very European in their concerns. So like I don't know I'm not sure if you're like a big fan of like the early days of cinema, like if you know your Lumiere brothers and whatnot. But
I mean I've seen some of that stuff.
Well, you know, there's like a lot of footage from that period of time of factory workers going into work. Like there's just like they would set up a tripod and shoot like 8 seconds of footage of people just marching into like a factory. Like there's like that's like some of the earliest things that people were shooting, because it was like these early periods of time of like mechanized labor. Like the Industrial Revolution was like long into its throes, but like there was like kind of a growing concern of like the dehumanizing quality of that. And I think like in visual culture, like German expressionists kind of were dealing with like this the angst of what that means for the human spirit, and like what that materialism and whatnot is a crushing thing. And so on the flip side, this film is very much like having fun with it rather than being like very serious. There's also like the correlations though, that like it's kind of a weird movie because it's 1931 and there's like a lot of like callbacks or references to like the rise of Nazi Germany and like and I mean the mechanization of that, like as a what will come like in like 7 years, like the mechanized army force of that. And like there's like the use of like the logo of like the record company. It's like I kept thinking like in the uniforms is very militaristic, and I'm like, that's like interesting. These like I don't know, to me like I kept reading them as like references to like the Nazis and like stuff like that. And I was like, this is like,
I think that's got something to do with your character more than anything.
Well, I kept wondering why this seems like almost like either right in the like at the time this was like a real fear, like Hitler was like coming into power, and you're like, huh, this was like really on people's minds long before people were like, oh well, it came out of nowhere. And it's like no, people were thinking about this for like years beforehand. But there's like the kind of like the heavier aspect of that, because of like the idea of like mechanizing slaughter, and then I mean you wind up with the Holocaust, which is like moving people in lines into trains and like filing them in and killing them effectively. It's like this horrifying application of like, well, we have to make a product, but how do we effectively kill people? And it's just like it's messed up. But but this movie obviously, well, look at history, I guess. Okay. On the flip side, on the lighter side of this discussion, there's definitely this like French kind of thorough line between this and Jacques Tati, with like with his like kind of critique, his satire of
his farce, Jarrett,
of modernism, I guess, because like we're not quite at modernism yet in society. Like things like people are still like dressed in like when you watch like Under the Roofs of Paris, like people are like very much dressed workmanly, like they're very like
well, it's
like,
industrialist.
Yeah, but it's like right on that line still. Like people aren't like in a point of comfort yet. The means of production are still figuring out like how to make things look nice, but like
well, you got to put the means of production back to the people, Jarrett.
Well, that's
comrade.
That's some Bolshevik talk right there.
You see, comrade.
Yeah, but so yeah, like in my mind, I'm like, okay, so we wind up later with Jacques Tati, who's a French director, making these criticisms about like consumerism and materialism and like this like how things are being made, and like it's like Chaplin kind of was probably more the person that like Tati would have been referencing, kind of being like a physical comedian, kind of contemporary to him. But like Rene Clair was kind of like doing that in his more impressionistic sort of way, but like also like far less memorable, just because like it's kind of tough to compete. So I don't know. He's like one of those guys that like, I guess it's good that his films aren't falling out of obscurity because they are now in the Criterion Collection. But at the same time,
Tati or Clair?
Clair.
Okay.
Yeah, like Tati is okay. He's doing okay. Yeah, but
yeah, he's fine.
Yeah, but I mean, we'll talk about the next.
Well, that's what I mean. So like for a Nous la Liberte, I kind of see why it's in here. Like I do think it has some interesting filmmaking, and I do like the way that they break down the assembly line and division of labor stuff, even if it is like a very literal metaphor for certain things. I think it's filmed nice, and I like the presentation of it.
Yeah.
So I think for the most part, I'm on board with that stuff. I like the kind of flares that he has with those specific elements. In terms of the story itself, I got a little lost watching this.
It's I have
so
like,
at certain
yeah.
just at certain times. So like I was on board with a lot of the things. I was like, okay, inmates, guy breaks out, one guy gets loose. He's running away, and then he runs into a marathon by chance and wins.
Yes.
And I was like, oh, this is so like it's so familiar to me, I think, because of like how often this seems to be done in like
Looney Tunes.
Yeah, like Looney Tunes, but even like just regular TV and movies. I was like, I've seen this so many times. This exact same story beat where it's like a guy running away that just by chance like merges into a marathon somehow. I was like, man, that's like, it's pretty wild that this 90-year-old movie did it also. So I thought that was interesting. But then, so we cut to the other inmate and his like attempts at suicide, or is that in the next movie?
That's no, that's still here because he was himself on the prison bars, and they wind up being loose.
Yeah, which I actually thought was like a nice little scene, because I was like, oh, how playful, Jarrett. How playful this all is. It's like it was going super grim, and I was like, oh shit, is this guy gonna kill himself? And then the bars break out, and I was like, good, great laughs for everyone.
Yeah.
So you have that, and he gets out and he's working in the factory, and then like I know when he meets up with his old chum, I know like where it was going, but at the same time in my mind I was like, did I miss something? I was like, or has it not been explained yet? And then like they do kind of backtrack a little bit where he's like, well, I got out, and then I opened up a factory, and now I'm the number one guy. I own all the money in France. And you're like, all right, okay, sure, okay. So like I don't know, like there's nothing about the story that I think is confusing or presented in a weird way, but just watching it, I was kind of like, I felt like I missed something. I was like, did I miss something?
It doesn't help that the two leads look basically the same. Like,
well, one has a mustache.
Well,
though.
later on, initially though, they're just like these doughy French guys in gray. Like in the movie's black and white, but everything seems gray. So, and then you're like, oh, they basically are the same man, and they're just like allowed to like work off of one another. I was reading in Who Hates This, they mentioned something about like they are allowed to like just like improvise a lot of stuff, which I think explains sort of this like kind of loose quality to the film. That's kind of like, oh, they were just making it up as they went, huh? Yeah,
loose quality. There are a few things like some of the slapstick doesn't totally land with me completely. Although there's certain like some of the comedy bits I don't think are as dated as things that came out like 10 years ago. Some of that shit is like extremely dated. Like, I don't know, Fortnite dancing type stuff. You watch that now in movies, you're like, ooh, baby. You're like, that's dated, and that hasn't even been like a year or two. So there were things in this that I was like, oh, that's not a bad joke. I was like, I don't really find it funny, but it's not a bad joke. But then there wasn't too many. It was just some of like, I guess the physical humor stuff, and that's more in Under the Roofs of Parents, but Under the Roofs of Parents. And not even like physical, like not body humor like Buster Keaton stuff, but like I don't know, what is the British thing where it's like Benny
Hill.
Benny Hill, yeah, like when they're running like from room to room. There's not a ton of that in that either, but there are some scenes where it is like people running around knocking shit over, and you're like, what's going on here?
When they're taking the money, they're trying to get the money out of there before like the jig is up, and then the money goes all out into the wind, and the money is liberated.
Mm-hmm. Liberated, comrade. So there's some stuff there. The one scene, what's your take on the scene when they're serving dessert and they spill whipped cream on everyone?
Everything. I don't know. I have no idea.
You have no opinion of that?
No, I don't know.
Okay, that's fine.
I guess I was like, yeah, that's happening. And then they're like, I never had any cake.
Yeah. I did really kind of sympathize, but not also sympathize, but kind of like mad about their response to that, where it's like, they're just watching it all unfold and they're laughing, and then they have the big response to it, which is like, I get why it's funny, one, but also two, you're kind of those assholes that are laughing at other people's misfortune. Where it's like if someone dropped a bunch of plates and you clap at it, you're like, ugh. You're like, don't do that. It's that lady's job or that guy's job, and they just drop some plates. Don't be clapping at that. It's not that extreme, but I don't know. Whipped cream is kind of funny. That old guy seemed to like it. He was on board with the joke. He was like, sure, whatever. Lay it on me, big dog. I felt like there were a few things that were brought up but never really addressed, like the like infidelicious, the wife that was like sleeping around. I was trying to say infidelity, but I was trying to think of a word that, like, anyways, like, I feel like that's like brought up as a subplot that like she has a boyfriend, but I never saw it again unless I missed it. Or is that ever brought up again?
I don't even know.
Because it was a whole scene. Like the butler saw her kissing some dude.
The second half of this movie really drags a bit.
Oh, how did you feel about the aggressive male presence in this movie? Where it's a lot of, hey, you're going to marry this guy. You're going to do it and you're going to like it. And it's like, oh, all right. It's in both of these movies where I think in it's in this one. So when it's like the factory guy, like the manager, and you see that really cool wall where the numbers are like running on the wall.
Yes.
It looks like it's just a piece of paper being pulled, but it looks cool. And he's grabbing on that lady real hard and heavy. And he's like, hey, baby, I'm the manager here. You could be the manager's wife. Let me tell you, my name's Jarrett Duncan. I work at this factory. That's what he does mostly, but anyways, it was a different time, I guess, Jarrett. That's what they all say, right?
That's what they all say.
That's what they all say. But I don't know. I think this movie has some good qualities to it. Like I enjoyed a good bit of it, and I thought it was watchable enough. But this isn't. None of these guys' movies so far are movies that I ever want to revisit or even think about.
Well, let's not jump to any conclusions here. We've got another one to talk about.
Yeah. Why don't you tell me about Under the Roofs?
Let me tell you. For whatever reason, this movie has a explicitly English title, but also a French one. Under the Roofs. Is it roofs or roofs, RJ?
Well, the actual title is ROOFS, so I would say roofs. Roofs. But I know that sounds wrong.
Under the roofs.
Under the roofs. Say rough.
Under the roofs of Paris.
Paris. Oh, yeah.
From 1930. From our boy, Rene.
Oh, yeah.
The synopsis from Letterboxd. In the tenement slums of Paris, between the world wars, impoverished street singer Albert yearns for beautiful Romanian immigrant Paula. Paula's boyfriend, local hoodlum Fred, grows jealous of Albert's constant attention to his woman and frames the hapless musician for one of his own petty crimes. But while Albert is in prison for Fred's misdeed, Paula ends up falling for Albert's faithful best friend, Louis.
Louis?
Another Louis. Louis. RJ?
Some people say Louis when it has the S on there.
They do.
What were you going to say, Jarrett?
This movie is a total bore. I did not like this at all. This is like right down there in the bottom for me for these Criterion movies. I don't know, man. Before I maybe get into all that, there's the one thing I like about this movie, and it's only because it just like made me go, oh, hey, Children of Paradise was a good movie. Because this movie is kind of like a Children of Paradise type of story in some ways. It's got this like kind of fake Paris, I guess, like it's a construct. Sure. And there's like these really cool pans down, over the roofs of Paris, down underneath the roofs of Paris. And it's really, it's like a really great shot. And at the very end of the movie, it has that as well. And I'm like, man, I just like to watch a movie of just like this footage, like of various, like that'd be way better than anything we just watched. And that's not a good thing. It's not a good thing. So the biggest problem with this movie is that it's so generic and you have no reason at all to care about anything that's happening in this thing whatsoever. The only like the main dude, Albert, man, he's just like has zero screen presence for me. The actress playing Paula, she's got that classic flapper look. She looks great.
What kind of look?
Flapper.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's not the Vegas flappers, right?
I don't know what that means, but
keep going.
okay. So, anyways, very that classic 20s look, the hair, the dress, makeup, all that stuff. She looks great. And then there's just like this plot going on in this movie.
The rest of the movie,
which is just like the most like this movie's like 5 hours long, and I know the box only says 95 minutes, but holy cow, it just wouldn't end. I messaged you at one point while watching this about like, what have we done with our lives?
Not much.
Why is this happening? Because like I just was like completely checked out. This thing.
So aren't you glad though that we're doing the Criterion Creeps initiative so that you're watching all these movies that could potentially be all-time bangers?
That's right.
But could potentially be under the roofs of Paris.
Yeah, where it's like this. If this movie was made like exactly the same way, like both like a contemporary set of actors, it would just be like no one would give a shit, because movies like this are made all the time and no one cares. It's only because this is like a Rene Clair film from 1930 that it's like of historical significance. But there's like again, there's these moments that like there's some nice camera work. There's like a nice like lighting, a nice quality to like the frame. Like there's just like these things where you're just like, this is just not interesting at all. If I was just like watching this movie for like the occasional screen grab or something like that, sure, I guess I could. Any movie's like interesting when you watch it that way, but there's like 1,000 movies you could watch instead.
Why don't you tell me how you really feel?
Oh, and I don't know, RJ, if it's any coincidence that these two films, particularly Under the Roofs of Paris, have like absolutely probably the worst covers in the Criterion Collection on DVD. They're
I don't know. I know the letterbox covers, but I don't know the actual.
You should check them out because they're stink town. They're a bad graphic design and everything like that. Like they would never be made like this ever again today. But they were real phoned in. I think back in whatever that would have been 2003 when these came out.
Under the Roof of Paris. Did they make it in PowerPoint?
Or no PowerPoint. Paint.
Oh my god! It's like, so if this is the actual Criterion cover,
it is.
It's got the open window.
Yeah. But look at the blue, like the framing of it, because both covers are bad. But Under the Roofs of Paris is like abysmal.
I think it's really funny because like I've been hanging out with kids, Jarrett, and I've seen some like, not in a weird way, I've seen some 12-year-old kids making PowerPoints, and like what they make is a lot more like polished than this thing. Like it looks like it's paint. Someone drew some rectangles, put them off angle a little bit, and they're like, it's a day. Let's call it. That's a good day. And then there's all these French words in the background, like in the back layer. What is that?
Why?
Good Lord, Jarrett, that is
like
quite poor.
We all know that like Criterion's like they're famed for their like graphic design, packaging.
Allegedly,
this is one of the misses, and
not very good, my man.
No, it's
very good.
It's kind of in that collection with arguably Fishing with John's DVD design,
which is unfortunate because it's the best Criterion movie.
But I think there is an argument that like the aesthetic of that DVD kind of fits that show, whereas this is just like awful, absolutely terrible.
It's quite. That was a genuine laugh on my end because I was just like, whoa. I didn't see that guy coming.
No, I remember years ago looking at some list on like a Reddit or something like that about like the like worst Criterion DVD art, and this was like one of them. And I was like, oh, one day we'll get to watch that movie too, and here we are. Was it worth it? Nope.
Good.
So RJ.
Yes.
Under the Roofs of Paris.
Yes.
How was that for you?
Under the Roofs of Paris. So I agree with you for the most part. I thought this movie was very boring. I thought this movie was even harder to stay in line with, where like for the first one, I was like, I'm kind of lost. That's probably my fault though. I was like, maybe I'm not paying enough attention. I didn't really fault the movie for it that much. It's like, well,
sometimes you got to fault the movie for it though. I feel.
I think this one I'm faulting the movie for, where there were certain things in this movie where I was like, what the fuck is going on? So guy meets girl, guy falls in love with girl, guy has best friend. Then one guy gets set up for a robbery or something, and then they want to get married, but then there's lots of bar fights, and then there's other characters doing other things that you're shown to. So this thing played out to me like a series of vignettes, and I don't think that they're actually connected, other than the fact that a couple of them are follow-ups to previous ones. So you have a couple characters, the two guys and the girl that you see more often, but then there's stories on the side that I was watching and I was like, I don't think this has anything to do with the movie. And then later it finishes and you're like, I don't think those things had anything to do with the movie. So I don't know where they came from. This one I do have a timestamp for because there was a screen cap there and I was like, oh yeah, how apropos, Jarrett. At 37 minutes, there is a "This is a nightmare" tag, and I was like, "Yeah, this isn't what I would like to be doing right now." I can say that much.
Ordeal.
A bit. Like, I can see what they were going for, where it's kind of like a love triangle, but it's also a friend story. And you see how playful they are, where it's like, let's share a smoke. And it's like, well, I only got one left. I'll give it to you because I'm a good pal. I'll give you my one smoke. And then the guy sees that and he's like, nah, I'll break this son of a bitch right in half. We'll share this cigarette so that we can be good pals. And you're like, oh man, these guys are really good pals with each other. Look at the lengths that they go to. But they're also not afraid to throw down and fight each other, Jarrett. It's very playful. So I don't know. I feel like there are certain elements to it. I think this one definitely is way more like silent era acting, where it's very kind of exaggerated expressions at times. A lot more noticeable than in the first one, where when I was watching some of the actors, I was like, why are they like overplaying it so much? Is it because they're used to silent movies, or
yeah,
like, what's the deal here?
Because this is a year older or newer or older, yeah. And so I mean, there's like those
that's what I
elements
figured,
of like overacting because actors are still figuring out that stuff.
Yes,
but yeah, there's like the weird kind of looping dialogue stuff that they're doing, like where they're putting the dialogue afterwards, and it's like doesn't quite work. but that's
that's not something that I like.
Yeah.
I don't hold that against it because it's old.
Yeah, I feel like the storytelling in this is just like such a slog,
dumpy. It's pretty dumpy, yeah. So I don't hold that against it, but it's something you do notice. One good thing that I actually do like is the shots of the buildings at the start and at the end. I was like, hey, look at those nice buildings. I was like, that's really nice.
Awesome. There's a couple of also neat shots too of like kind of in the middle part of the movie, I guess. There's like the bit where like the camera's kind of panning down in the like tenement building.
On the building.
And you get like kind of like the architecture of it, which is like really neat. Like there's like these technical elements of this movie that are like the only thing worth talking about. But they're all to the service of like a incredibly, I don't know, boring movie. Like,
yeah, exactly. So like those two things, and then the one other one that I really liked, I liked the staging of the fight scene at the end with the street lights and stuff. I was like, I like this. I thought it looked really nice. I was like, I like the way that they kind of laid this all out here for these dudes having a street brawl at the end of it. But so I thought that looked good, but I also thought it was really funny how it was like preluded by the Crocodile Dundee, like that's not a knife scene where there's like 20 knives and you're just like, what is going on here? Dude pulls out his knife and then the other guy pulls out a pocket knife. He's like, what are you gonna do? But then they actually fight with knives and I was like, ugh. I was like, that really like escalated.
Spill those guts.
Spill them guts. So I don't know. I think the story is hard to follow. And even when you do understand what's going on, because you do figure it out, I think it's not particularly interesting. So you're kind of like, oh, whatever. This is a movie that's 8 or 90 years old almost.
Would you describe this as this plot is like a love square?
Yeah, kind of. And that's what I think. But so I don't want to be too nice on it either, because Nous la Liberte came out like a year later, and I actually thought that one was fine. Like I wasn't amazed by it, but I was like it was fine. I was like, it had some technical aspects that I think are really impressive. Where in this one, it's like there was 3 things that I took away from it. That building shot that I liked at the start, your building shot, like the pan going up, I like that one too, and then the fight scene at the end. Everything else in between, I was kind of just like,
yeah.
Just like, I don't fucking care about this stuff. So I don't know, man. Like, it's okay. It's definitely okay, but I don't think it's anything super interesting. So
yeah,
it's not. If you're going to watch one of these, watch a Nous la Liberte. You don't need to watch Under the Roofs of Paris. It's 90 minutes you can't get back.
Yeah, there's like so many movies from 1930 you should watch instead, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that hit movie Capes.
Yeah.
That came out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huge movie. Huge
movie. Big release.
Technical marvel.
Ah, that's what they say.
Well, RJ.
Yes.
I think it's time to talk about who hates these movies.
Does anybody has anyone even watched these fucking movies?
Act more than you'd expect. First up, Nous la Liberte. 1.5 star from Boris Christ.
You think that's his real name?
Oh, I don't know.
Okay.
Rene Clair's Nous la Liberte, Henry Marchand, and Raymond Cordy are woefully miscast as 2 ex-convicts. Actually, I think they're not even ex-cons. They are convicts. I mean,
yeah,
they never did their time.
They're escaped convicts.
Yeah. I had high hopes for this picture, but ultimately the humor fails to produce laughs, and the satire is misguided and disconnected from the truth. The tone of the movie is sharply uneven, and that's likely due to the fact that the movie had no shooting script and the actors were forced to improvise. This ultimately leads to the fragile and disjointed structure. I have no idea why Rene Clair trusted these actors to build the foundation for his movie. They simply do not have the screen presence or charisma to carry a film. On that basis alone, the movie is not effective, and thus I cannot recommend it. With that said, the score provided by Georges Auric is one of the most positive aspects of this movie, as it attempts to match the movements of the assembly line. It almost makes up for the lack of chemistry between Marchand and Cordy. Rene Clair shows glimpses of promise, and with better actors he might have pulled this off, but his lack of vision is accentuated by the lack of truth in the messages he attempts to portray. At no point does Boris Christ talk about what these things are. It's like, what is this, a review of us?
Okay, so I think the most striking thing about Boris Christ is that this review of this movie exists because it's an abandoned account.
Yep.
But it is also a professional troll.
Yep.
Because 5-star movies, even though I agree with this, Batman v Superman, but then Piranha, Furry Vengeance, Spy Next Door, White House Down. It's like, all right, that's weird. Half-star movies, Shawshank Redemption, Schindler's List, E.T., Doctor Strangelove, OJ Made in America. So they're not real ratings, but then at the same time, this person only has 30 movies logged, and one of them happens to be this Rene Clair movie, and there's an actual review for it. So it's like why?
I was wondering what the message that Boris is alluding to is. Well, the one that we were talking about earlier, and saying it's a false one. I don't know.
Jarrett, it's a farce.
Yeah. Michael Elliott, 2 stars. I know this film is hailed as a masterpiece. I don't know about that.
Is it?
No. And I know Chaplin's Modern Times owes a lot to it, but that doesn't mean the film worked for me. Maybe I got it wrong. Maybe it's Rene Clair
one way or the
Chaplin.
other.
I don't care.
Who gives a shit?
Claire's
Claire's
satirical look at factory workers and their owners who are willing to exchange them for machinery is supposed to be a comedy, but I'm not sure which part of it is. Having now seen the film for myself, I can see why the original company went after Chaplin. Okay. Because there's no way in hell that this film didn't influence Chaplin in his masterpiece. However, to me, it seems Chaplin saw a technically brilliant but soulless film and made a much better picture. Credit should be given to Clair because the technical look of this film is brilliant and the music score is top-notch. See, I don't even...
Everyone's talking about the score. I didn't hear the score once when I watched these movies.
Yeah, but that's about as far as my admiration goes. There wasn't a single time in this film where I laughed, and I only cracked a smile a couple times. The film was clearly spoofing the factory workers, yet I could never see any of the spoof. Had you not told me this was a comedy, then everything on the screen comes off as a drama, because it doesn't seem to me that there was any attempt for laughs. Another problem I had was the dialogue, which was great, but at the same time it kind of went against what was going on in the scenes. The movie is filmed in a silent manner, and in my opinion, it probably would have worked best as a silent movie. The spoken words, because somewhat distracting from the technical side of things, So it came off to me as Clair was either making a silent film and later decided to make it sound, or the film is just uneven.
Which one is it?
I know which one I'd go with. Okay,
so Michael Elliott Jarrett has peculiar taste.
Yeah.
So it's mostly Criterion's are the liked movies. Favorite movies are like Annie Hall, Maniac, Bride of Frankenstein, which is the lesser of the first two. I can confirm by my own personal opinion, Frankenstein is better than Bride of Frankenstein. Midnight Cowboy. So lots of Criterions. But when I look into their half-star ratings, I find a lot of movies that I'm a little bit confused by.
Sexually?
Because, yes, actually, a lot of porn. So I know you were kidding, but literally a lot of porn. And it's like they're half-star reviews, but it's kind of like you had to have gone out of your way to watch Semen Demon from 2005. And you probably had to go out of your way to watch Jesus Christ, Serial Rapist from 2004. So there's a lot of movies like that.
Yeah.
And they're all half-star, and it's like you didn't just happen upon Semen Demon. Like, you went out of your way to watch that. And you gave it a half a star. It seems off, Jarrett. But also, are you interested in either of those two movies?
No.
Okay, that's fine. I'm fine with that, but do you see why I'm confused?
No.
But why though?
Under the Roofs of Paris.
Okay.
1 star. Watched by Cosmic Monkey.
Interesting.
It's part of that awkward era of semi-silent films that never really worked, and its narrative, probably tired and uninspired already back then, is muddled, disjointed, and too slow. Its biggest weakness is its protagonist, a lecherous, probably rapist creep who doesn't know how to take no for answer.
Classic.
His unlikability removes any chance of emotional connection. I doubt it was a great film when it came out, and it certainly isn't 85 years later.
Is that it?
That's it.
Criterion type stuff.
Mm-hmm.
4 favorite movies: Red Shoes, Florida Project, Citizen Kane, all that jazz. But when we get to those half-star reviews, they got Flubber in there, which I don't think is fair. Flubber's fine. It's not a half-star movie. What are your opinions on Flubber?
Before my time.
What do you mean? You were alive when Flubber came out. What are you talking about?
1.5 stars. Mauricio Xavier.
Well, that's fine. Just ignore me completely. Whatever.
Kind of funny that I watched this on the same day I rewatched Breathless, as Claire's treatment of his female lead
up to you.
Makes me long for Godard's gender essentialist bullshit. At least
What?
Godard depicted her carrying her own moments, doing her own things. Of course, I love that they're writing this without naming the female character, just calling her. The film leaves her at the moment she leaves the men, rendering itself absolutely unable to get any sort of insight into her. In fact, the film seems to have no insight into anything, approaching everything it depicts as information to feed the viewer, stifling any possible drama that could come out of the setups, which are all fairly interesting. Clair seems to have a juvenile visual sense here, and it gets endearing on occasion, the focus on feet for one. But more often than not, it just seems misguided. A pan to the right revealing a man about to follow a woman is probably the worst version of the meet cute ever created, but lo and behold.
What's lo and beholded?
I'm shaking my head back and forth. That is all.
There's nothing lo and beholded?
No.
Okay, so here's the thing, Jared. Lots of Criterion movies, lots of things like No Country and Amadeus as favorite films. Pretty standard fare. But you go to 1-star movies, you have Take Shelter and Kill List. And then when you go to 1.5-star movies, you have Videodrome, Dirty Harry, Repo Man, and your favorite movie, Dark Knight Rises, Drive, Exodus, Gods and Kings. What's going on here? Three Amigos? That's not a 1-star movie. What are you talking about, Mauricio? What are you talking about, Mauricio?
Yeah.
Am I right?
Yeah.
Jarrett?
Yeah.
What are you talking about, Mauricio?
There you have it, folks. Rene Clair in a nutshell.
Mauricio Clair?
And we won't be seeing his rotten hide again till we watch I Married a Witch. That's like hundreds.
He's got more?
Only one more. And that's like
thank God.
Hundreds of weeks from now. We're safe.
Hundreds of weeks?
Yep.
I'll be dead by then.
Exactly.
Yeah. You'll have to do it still, though.
We won't even have podcasts then.
You will have to do it still.
Oh.
Won't you?
Well, that's it, RJ.
Yeah.
We did it.
Did we?
After the break, we're going to hang ourselves on those prison bars. But the bars aren't loose.
I wish.
We'll escape life, if not prison.
Or are you still going?